Hello there, this is MTG Degree, my name is Luke, and today we're going to do a deck tech. We're going to do it a little bit differently this time though, because the deck is hot off the presses, and so the exact numbers I don't think have been figured out for these cards. However, the deck is very strong, so I want to go over what is likely to end up in it and what makes it tick and why it's so strong. So first, let's go over the major win condition in the deck. So the major win condition are the two cards, Thopter Foundry and Sword of the Meek. Now let's say that we have both of these on the table at the same time. So the way it works is, you spend 1 mana into Thopter Foundry, you sacrifice Sword of the Meek. When Sword of the Meek goes to the graveyard, you get a 1/1 Thopter and gain 1 life. Then Sword of the Meek sees a 1/1 come into play, and it comes back and reattaches to that Thopter, and now you've got a 2/3 Thopter, right? Then you can sacrifice Sword of the Meek again for 1 mana, it goes to the graveyard, you get your 1/1 Thopter, it comes back from the graveyard and attaches to that Thopter. So basically you can gain as much life and 1/1 Thopters as you have mana. An extremely strong combo. Now when it comes to this combo, the first thing that we want to ask ourselves is, what kind of shell can you use this best? And the answer is a shell that can have a lot of mana, so you can make a lot of Thopters, and a shell in which everything about it is good. So the life gain is good, and all of the 1/1 Thopters are good. So a great example of this is Control, and I think that's its natural habitat. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to drag out the game a really long time, and then this combo can bring you back from any problem that you have. They have a lot of attackers, you have a lot of chump blockers. You're low on life, suddenly you're not low on life. And it fixes all the problems that Control has, while giving it a way to win. Now let's next talk about the mana base. I don't want to get into a bunch of specific cards, but I do want to highlight 2. The first one is Academy Ruins. I spotted this immediately as a prior Lantern Control player as something that would help out these control decks. If you're playing against things like Ancient Grudge, Kolaghan's Command, this is a great way to still assemble your Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek combo, even when it keeps getting blown up, and is quite good. The next land that I want to talk to you folk about is Celestial Collonade. Now this is an extremely powerful land. And the reason why is because you get a 4/4 Vigilance Flyer at the end of the game. Let's say somebody plays something like Stony Silence against you, you have a hard time fighting back against that. It suddenly becomes a reasonable way to win, to just beat them to death with your 4/4 land. And that is a legitimate way to win. So when we're looking at this deck, Celestial Colonnade is a fantastic thing to put in. However, there is one downside to Celestial Colonnade, which is that you always want to play it on turn 1. And there are only so many things that you can do on turn 1, right? And another thing that you might really want to do on turn 1 is play Ancestral Visions. Now Ancestral Visions is a fantastic card, there is no doubt about it. However, there are so many things that a control deck might want to do on turn 1. For example, it might want to leave up mana for Dispel, or Spell Snare, or Spell Pierce. All very strong things to hold up your mana for. Another thing that a control deck might want to do on turn 1 is play Serum Visions. So you can see that it's an extremely contested spot. So it's unclear whether or not it belongs in the deck. I personally am running it right now just because I love the feeling of drawing 3. Now let's move on to the counterspell suite in this deck. Now the first one that I'd like to mention is Spell Snare, which I personally love. When you look at Modern, there are so many powerful cards at converted mana cost 2. Really an absurd amount. You will always find something to hit, pretty much always, with your Spell Snare, so it's a fantastic tool to have. The next counterspell that's often included in this kind of deck is Dispel. And the reason why is its sheer power level. 1 blue to counter an instant is amazing. Of course, not all decks have instants, and that's why we don't want to overload on these. A lot of decks only include 1, just for a little bit of versatility. Our next set of counterspells really asks the question, what are we trying to do? and those two counterspells are Remand and Mana Leak. Now if we're trying to find our combo, if we're just trying to hold off our opponent for a little while we set it up, then Remand will be the more played counterspell. If, however, we're trying to permanently solve problems and do a very hard control route as we naturally find our combo, then the answer will more often be Mana Leak. And I think that in most decks, both will be included. But for example, you might have 4 Remand and 1 Mana Leak, or you could have 3 Mana Leaks and 2 Remand, just depending on what the true goal of the deck is. The last card I'd like to mention is Cryptic Command, which is an extremely powerful counterspell. It has been said before that if you have a Cryptic Command in your hand and you can cast it, that you cannot die on that turn. Of course, that's a slight exaggeration, but not by much. The card is extremely powerful. No matter what your problem is, attack steps, burn spells, whatever, it'll solve those problems for you. I'd also like to mention that if blue is coming back, Cryptic Command is only $25 now, and we've seen it a lot higher. Just saying. Now the next cards that I'd like to mention are 2 that kind of combo together, so I'm going to present them at the same time, which is Talisman of Progress and Thirst for Knowledge. Now we have a decent amount of artifacts in this deck already because of the combo that we're trying to set up. When we add Talisman of Progress, then we start having enough artifacts that oftentimes you'll be able to pitch one to Thirst for Knowledge so that you get a good card draw engine while filtering out things that you have too many of. So it's a very strong way to draw cards. Now in the decks that I've seen this combo, I haven't seen Ancestral Vision. And the reason why is because you're choosing which way you want to draw cards. Would you like to ramp and then pitch away extra stuff to Thirst for Knowledge? Or would you like to try to suspend an Ancestral Visions and just control the game until it's time to collect? Now let's talk removal. When it comes to getting rid of individual creatures in Modern, Path to Exile is just the most efficient way to do it. What an excellent card. And so of course, we're playing 4 of them. And also, there's Condemn. Very interesting, not played that much, but it's a great way for 1 mana to slow down that aggression by a good amount. And I like it, so including 1 is a pretty cool little innovation. There's one more piece of removal in this deck that I really love, which is Detention Sphere. This is fantastic because it hits like everything. You can get rid of creatures, you can get rid of planeswalkers, you can get rid of enchantments. It really hits just about everything that you want to hit, and so I'm all for it. But it does cost 3, so most lists just have 1. Now of course, this is a control deck, and what do control players love to do more than sweep the board away? And what's the best way to do that in Modern? Well, you could make a lot of arguments for different ones, but in blue-white, there is always Supreme Verdict. Now, of course, there is one blue creature which belongs in every self-respecting blue control deck. We all know who he is. He is the fantastic, the amazing, the Snapcaster Mage. This creature will allow you to do lots of fun little blocks in combat while at the same time getting rid of cards that are being cast, all sorts of nonsense. This is just an incredibly versatile creature that every blue mage just loves to have 4 of in their deck, and so of course he's being seen here as well. Now in the upcoming months there will be a lot of evolutions on this deck. Is it going to run Talisman of Progress and Thirst for Knowledge? Is it just going to suspend an Ancestral Vision to try to get card advantage? Who knows? I also really like the idea of splashing a little bit of red, that way you get Lightning Bolt in there. A fantastic removal spell, a fantastic way to close out the game, combos very well with Snapcaster, a really strong card. And even beyond the control shell, there's another shell, which is playing it with Tezzeret the Seeker or Tezzeret Agent of Bolas, and just going ham on the artifact combo nonsense. Now, of course, artifact hate is going to hurt you a lot more in those builds than in this one. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not going all artifact is going to be efficient enough to make up for that risk, or whether or not going the control route is going to be the way to value town your way to victory. Now when it comes to sideboards, those are always a fluid thing, and right after this banned and restricted announcement, we can imagine that our sideboards are going to be more fluid than ever. So I hesitate to give you an exact 15, although I might do that anyway. But here, let me take a bunch of sideboard cards that are great in these colors and pop them up on the screen. As you take a look at these, I hope that you can see some that look like they'll be useful against the decks that you're seeing locally. Anyway guys, I hope that this deck tech discussion has been interesting to you. I know that a lot of you want a full 75 list, so I've decided to just include one in the description, so that if you're really just wanting to playing it, then you can go out and get those cards. As always, I'll see you next video.